The conference room at Argenesis Biotech was as sterile as a surgical suite, the kind of place designed to inspire confidence. A wall of glass separated the attendees from the laboratory beyond, where scientists in crisp white coats moved with quiet efficiency among sleek workstations. A large projection screen at the front of the room displayed a single word in bold, futuristic lettering, Nuevaderm. Jordan Reyes leaned back in his chair, flipping open a notebook. He had covered more than his fair share of medical breakthroughs over the years, and most had turned out to be little more than overhyped gimmicks wrapped in layers of corporate spin. Still, Argenesis had a reputation for delivering on its promises, and the whispers about their latest project had been particularly insistent. A synthetic skin that could heal injuries instantly. Wounds closing in seconds. Burn victims walking away from trauma without so much as a scar. The woman at the podium, Dr. Naomi Tanaka, exuded the quiet authority of someone who knew the weight of the moment. Clad in a tailored suit, her dark hair pulled into a severe bun, she let the murmuring crowd settle before she spoke. "We stand on the precipice of a new era in regenerative medicine," she began, her voice steady but edged with excitement. "For years, we have relied on traditional wound care, stitches, grafts, transplants. But those methods are inefficient, slow, and, most importantly, imperfect. Nuevaderm changes everything." A video flickered to life on the screen behind her, showing a deep laceration on a test subject's forearm. A dropper released a milky, translucent fluid onto the wound. Within seconds, the torn skin knitted together, the gash sealing as if it had never been there at all. The room was utterly silent. This is not a bandage. It is not a graft. Nuevaderm is a living polymer designed to integrate seamlessly with human tissue, responding at a cellular level to repair and strengthen the skin. The video continued, now showing microscopic footage of Nuevaderm bonding with living cells. The synthetic material did not merely coat the skin, it became part of it, merging so completely that it was indistinguishable from natural tissue. Jordan watched the demonstration with a mixture of skepticism and unease. The implications were staggering, but there was something about the way the synthetic layer moved that unsettled him. It wasn't just repairing. It was growing. Eric Matheson had always prided himself on being the kind of man who didn't dwell on fear. It was a necessity in his line of work. When you spent your days running into burning buildings, hesitation could mean the difference between life and death. The fire had started in an old apartment complex on the east side of the city, a structure well past its prime. He had been inside when a section of the ceiling collapsed, trapping him under a wave of burning debris. His gear had protected him, mostly, but his left arm and shoulder had taken the brunt of it. By the time they pulled him out, his skin was a ruin of charred flesh. The doctors had warned him about the long recovery process, about the likelihood of skin grafts and permanent scarring. Instead, they offered him an alternative. "There's a clinical trial," the specialist had told him. "It's experimental, but the results so far have been remarkable. It could restore full function. No scars." He had agreed before they even finished explaining the procedure. Now, sitting on the edge of his hospital bed, Eric unwrapped the bandages for the first time. He had been told what to expect, but nothing could have prepared him for the sight of it. The skin was smooth and unblemished. Perfect. Not just healed, renewed. There was no discoloration, no ridges where the grafts should have been. It looked as if the fire had never touched him at all. He flexed his fingers experimentally, watching as the skin stretched and shifted with the motion. It felt different. Not numb, exactly, but more aware than before, as if his skin was paying attention. Detective Angela Locke was used to missing persons cases. Most of the time, they ended predictably: runaways, domestic disputes, the occasional unfortunate accident. But the case that had landed on her desk that morning was different. The man's wife had come in hysterical, clutching a photograph as she begged someone to listen. "He's not missing," she had whispered. "He's wrong." Locke had taken the statement with the same professionalism she always did, but as she sat in her squad car outside the missing man's apartment, a sense of unease settled in her gut. The wife's description had been vague, "He's not himself anymore," but something about the way she had said it had left Locke feeling as if she had stepped into something deeper than the usual domestic dispute. She rapped on the apartment door, glancing down at the file again. Michael Cardenas. 42. Recently underwent a Nuevaderm procedure. No prior history of erratic behavior. The door opened a crack, and Locke caught a glimpse of a man standing in the dim interior. "Mr. Cardenas?" The man hesitated. His eyes darted to her badge, and for a moment, it seemed as if he was going to slam the door in her face. Then, slowly, he stepped back, allowing her inside. Something about him immediately struck her as off. His posture was stiff, his arms held unnaturally close to his sides, as if he were unsure of how to move them. The light overhead cast subtle shadows on his face, and she realized with a jolt that his skin didn't crease the way it should when he blinked. I don't think I'm me anymore," he whispered. Naomi sat alone in her office, deep in concentration. The official reports had all been favorable. No significant side effects. No reason for concern. But the raw data told a different story. She scrolled through the logs, her fingers tightening around the mouse. There were anomalies, small, at first. Discrepancies in sensory feedback. Minor irregularities in tissue response. But the most recent cases were impossible to ignore. Patients reported sensations that should not have been possible. A handful of them exhibited behavioral changes. She hesitated, then opened a secure file hidden deep in the system. A video feed flickered to life, showing a patient in an observation room. He sat on the edge of his cot, motionless, until, without warning, he raised a hand to his forearm and peeled the skin back. Naomi swallowed hard. The flesh beneath was not human. Jordan had spent enough years chasing dead-end leads to recognize when something wasn't right. Every time he got too close to a story with real stakes, there was always someone willing to make it disappear: corporations, government agencies, even private entities with enough resources to bury the truth under layers of misdirection. The man he had come to see had been one of Argenesis Biotech's top researchers until 6 months ago, when he had abruptly resigned. His name was Daniel Mercer, and according to the sparse information Jordan had been able to dig up, he had been involved in the Nuevaderm trials from the beginning. The address Jordan had tracked down led him to a dingy motel on the outskirts of the city, the kind of place where people went when they wanted to disappear. The room door was already cracked open when he arrived. Mercer looked like a man who hadn't slept in weeks. His eyes were bloodshot, his skin pale, and his hands trembled slightly as he gestured for Jordan to come inside. "You shouldn't have found me," Mercer muttered. "I think you wanted me to," Jordan replied. "You wouldn't have left a digital trail if you didn't." "You don't understand what you're getting into," Mercer said, rubbing at his face. "Nuevaderm wasn't ready." "It isn't ready." Jordan flipped open his notebook. "Tell me why." "There were irregularities. We knew the material was adaptive, but we underestimated the extent of its integration. It doesn't just heal, it assimilates." Mercer's hands clenched into fists. "We started seeing cognitive changes in early recipients. Personality shifts. Some of them described feeling detached from their own bodies. Others. They stopped feeling human at all." Jordan narrowed his eyes. "You mean psychologically?" Mercer shook his head. "I mean physically." Eric had never been the kind of man to obsess over his own body. He had always trusted it, knowing what it could endure, understanding its limitations. But the past few days had changed that. There was something unnatural about the way his skin reacted to injury. The first time it happened, it was a minor cut, so small he might not have noticed it at all if it hadn't sealed shut within seconds. He had been in the kitchen, slicing vegetables, when the knife had slipped and nicked the tip of his finger. There had been a sharp sting, a bead of blood, and then, before his eyes, the wound had closed itself. He had stared at his finger, flexing it, rubbing the skin to see if there was any lingering sensitivity. There was none. It was as if the cut had never been there. By the second time, he was no longer able to dismiss it as a fluke. A splinter had lodged itself in his palm while he was repairing a broken chair in his apartment. He had felt the sharp prick, had watched the tiny sliver of wood embed itself just beneath the surface, but as he reached for a pair of tweezers to pull it free, the skin simply pushed it out. A wave of nausea had gripped him as he saw it happen. The flesh around the wound had rippled slightly, shifting in a way that reminded him of time-lapse footage of vines growing and curling around trellises. The splinter had been expelled as if his body had rejected it outright. It wasn't just the healing, though. His fingertips were growing more sensitive by the day. Textures that had once been familiar now felt overwhelming. His clothes felt abrasive against his skin, the sensation of air moving over his body made him shiver involuntarily, and the simple act of touching smooth surfaces sent a strange, almost electrical sensation up his spine. At night, he found himself scratching. He would wake to find his nails digging into his forearms or trailing across his chest. The sensation was not pain, nor was it an itch in the traditional sense. It was something deeper, something beneath the skin. Detective Locke had seen plenty of violent deaths in her career, but the crime scene she stood in now unsettled her in a way she couldn't quite define. The victim had been found in his apartment, torn apart in a manner that suggested a frenzied attack. Blood soaked the floor, the walls, even the ceiling. The body itself had been reduced to pieces, the limbs separated from the torso, the flesh shredded. But it was the skin that caught her attention. The crime scene tech had pointed it out as she arrived. Despite the sheer brutality of the attack, the skin itself remained intact. It was as if something had stripped the body down to its raw components and then discarded what it no longer needed. The sheet of synthetic flesh lay discarded on the floor, whole and unbroken. The coroner stood beside it, his face pale. "I've never seen anything like this," he murmured. "It's like he stepped out of it." The official recall of Nuevaderm was announced 2 days later. The government assured the public that all affected individuals would receive treatment, and that there was no ongoing threat. The incident was labeled a containable anomaly. The city returned to normal, the headlines faded, and the world, as it always did, moved on. But in quiet rooms, in darkened streets, in places where no one was looking, those who had been changed remained. Some had vanished entirely, their husks discarded like the remnants of a molted shell. Others remained behind, watching and waiting. Cardenas released a statement a month after the recall. They called it a recommitment to transparency. A new press conference was scheduled, same building, same stage, same familiar logo. The media came in droves, drawn by promises of next-generation biomedical advancements. The speaker was Dr. Naomi Tanaka. She stepped up to the podium with a calm, composed expression. Her voice was steady, her hair pulled into the same severe bun she'd worn at the original launch. Her skin was flawless, too flawless. "The setbacks have been addressed," she said to the crowd. "Nuevaderm is ready." Jordan Reyes sat in the back of the room, notebook open in his lap, hands trembling slightly, a bead of cold sweat forming near his brow. He hadn't been invited, but he had to be there. Had to see it for himself. See her for himself. The face was Naomi's. The cadence was hers. But her eyes never blinked. Her chest never rose to breathe. And when she smiled, it was wider than it should have been. No one else seemed to notice. Jordan fidgeted in his chair and swallowed hard. Humanity's evolution was inevitable. It was never a matter of if, but of when, she said. And thanks to Nuevaderm, the wait is over. Why be you when you can be new? The room erupted in applause.